In 2020, over 40 million Americans provided unpaid care for individuals aged 65 and older. 90% of those unpaid caregivers were family members. Over 65% of caregivers reported having a mental or behavioral health symptom in the last 30 days. Depression rates among family caregivers is twice as high as the general population in America. Today I'm going to cover the 7 steps every caregiver must take. Hey there, I'm Michelle and I provide videos sharing information I'm learning as a caregiver, a nurse, a coach, and someone living with autoimmunity. Okay, step 1. Am I called to be the caregiver for this loved one? And if so, in what capacity am I called to be their caregiver? This question actually relates to meaning and purpose in life, asking the question, what else am I called to do? The reason we ask this question is because caregiving has a tendency to take over every area of our life. This question helps us figure out and determine if we're accepting the caregiving role because we've chosen to, because we feel called to it, or because we've been forced into it. And later in this video, I will talk about anger and guilt. Those are 2 emotions that most caregivers deal with, and I'll give you some quick information on those. And then defining what that caregiving actually means. How much time can I give? How much money can I devote? How much physical exertion can I expend? And how much emotional energy can I contribute? These may sound like selfish questions, but they're actually not. We need to determine how much we can actually give while still maintaining our own health and wellness. And that gets us into step 2. Step 2 is define and follow the basics for my own health. Each of us, being born as a human being, has the automatic responsibility of taking care of our bodies, our health, and our wellness. Because if we don't take on that role and take on that responsibility, somebody else in society will have to. Defining where you are and what your needs are and what your responsibilities are, and then combining those with step 1 of what your caregiving responsibilities are, is necessary for compassion. In Brené Brown's book, Atlas of the Heart, she eloquently describes that compassion is about boundaries. I need to know where I end and the other person begins in order to even demonstrate compassion. The important thing with caregiving is making sure that we're taking care of all the areas in our life that we're responsible for, not just caregiving. And I want to share for a lot of people who feel like they've been forced into caregiving. There are still elements of choice even within that required role. We feel as caregivers that we need to give everything. And if we're not giving everything, we're not doing enough. But we actually can't take away from our responsibility of taking care of ourselves. So creating and going through these steps helps us maintain that with control so emotion isn't taking over. Now, does that mean all of this is easy? No, but it is possible. So step 3, accept the role that I've been assigned, no more, no less, and then fill in the gaps. So I've taken step 1, what are the areas of caregiving I can do? What can I give? Step 2, what are the areas in my life that I'm still responsible for, including my own health and wellness? And I've combined those, and now I'm creating a plan of what caregiving looks like for me. And I'm figuring out where the gaps are. These are the areas I can't provide care for my loved one. Step 4 is write and sign the contract. It might seem a little silly, but taking the time to actually write down what you went through, those are the decisions you made when emotion wasn't involved. It's important that that's written down because oftentimes as caregivers, we function off of emotion, oftentimes guilt and anger. It also isn't a criteria that family, friends, or even the one you're caring for agree with the contract. This is what you know you're able to give. And then it's important, step 5, to communicate. In communicating to family and your loved one and friends where those boundaries are and where those gaps are, you've not only advocated for you and your health and wellness, you've actually advocated for your loved one. And that's because if we overextend ourselves and go outside of the areas we're meant to go, we start to wear ourselves out, and then we're actually not providing good caregiving to our loved one. Step number 6 is fill the gaps. Call family, friends, let them know where those gaps are and how they can potentially help. Have Uncle Henry in Alaska research things online. Have your sister 2 hours away come once a month and give you a free weekend so you can rest and have respite. Often churches have volunteers that are willing to come sit with loved ones to provide the caregiver a respite. There are home care agencies that provide this care as well, and you can look on care.com for some of that information. And get your estate planning taken care of with your loved one. All the advanced directives, medical power of attorney. The gold standard is still getting with an estate attorney for this. Step number 7 is seek support and then reevaluate the list often. Support groups are a must. I actually call them resource groups. In support groups, you're going to have individuals who are in varying stages of caregiving. They're going to have things that worked for them, things that didn't. They're going to have local resources to reach out to and a lot of great advice that you can use. And then you reevaluate steps 1 through 6 often. Have I allowed this caregiving role to begin to define me? Remember, I'm not a caregiver. I'm somebody who provides care. That's one of the things I do. But I still have other responsibilities as a human being. We talk about it and the importance of taking care of ourselves, but in caregiving, it becomes almost more important. Okay, and like I promised, 2 emotions that caregivers deal with the most, guilt and anger. According to Andy Stanley's Enemies of the Heart, each enemy is based on feeling owed something. Guilt says, I owe you, right? Am I caregiving because I feel I owe my loved one something? Or am I caregiving because I went through these steps? I feel called to do it. It's part of my purpose and meaning, and I've defined it. Anger says you owe me. So if I'm caregiving and I start to develop some anger or some bitterness towards my loved one or other family members, they owe me help, right? I need to keep that in check because I'm not caregiving because I want something back. I'm caregiving the amount that I defined I can caregive it, and that doesn't require being paid or given something back. Now, when I first created this list, I actually had Bible verses attached to each of the steps. I did this because for me, as a believer in Christ, it became important to link it with true meaning and purpose. It was a very spiritual decision for me. If you're interested in this list and would like a copy, reach out to me through my website. I'd be glad to send it to you. And if you are needing help keeping control of your health and wellness as a caregiver, please reach out to me today.